Hello, welcome to Film Trace. This is where we trace the life of a movie from conception to production, all the way to release and reception. Season 4, episode 5, maybe?
6, Dan.
Are we on 6?
We're on 6 now.
And it's an old movie, and it's our oldest movie.
Yeah, oldest movie ever.
Chris, you get to do the intro because it's your baby here. And then you also get to introduce our special guests.
I'm happy to, absolutely. So it's the 40th anniversary of the horror comedy classic An American Werewolf in London. And it's written and directed by John Landis. And there was a kind of surprise to me, because I know how much of a horror junkie you are, Dan, that you hadn't seen it until I picked it for the show. Yeah. So I'm super excited to go in depth. Typically, when we do an older film on the show, it's kind of hard to find some research, but I found it actually pretty easy. This movie is probably most famous for its special effects, groundbreaking, the first makeup Oscar. We'll get into all of that and more, and look at how it kind of plays 40 years later. But first, I want to make sure to do a proper introduction of our guests today. We've got the boys, BOIS, from There Are Too Many Movies. Thanks, Josh, Alex, Chris, for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yes, we're so excited to be here.
Yeah.
You can hear it in our voices.
Tell us about your podcast. What is it all about?
So There Are Too Many Movies. It's just a movie review comedy podcast. We're based in Dallas, Texas. We break down a movie. We either toast or praise it, roast it or sing its praises. We got trivia, games, a bunch of other stuff that...
Far be it for me to say we are a lot less professional than you guys when it comes to critiquing film. It's mostly comedy, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say so. Mostly.
There's not really
saying like we're comedians. We're not really comedians, but
we are Hollywood's unofficial podcast.
Correct.
So.
There's not really a format. It's a postmodern take on podcasts.
There you go. I love it. Meta podcast.
Yes.
I did not listen to your recent episode on Tomorrow War, but before we jump into American Werewolf, I just want to get what was your guys' take on that? Was that a roast or a?
I loved it.
Well,
immediate.
It's what we call a summer fun top-down action convertible fun time, which means it's just you become a human box of popcorn and kind of enjoy the ride. That being said, was not that fun though. About 45 minutes too long. Yeah,
it was. Definitely
it's very long.
Too long.
Sorry,
but it's not as bad as people thought. I thought it was a fun time. I thought it was a good romp. Had you guys seen this movie? Are you horror fans? Let's start with that.
I have personally not seen it, even though I have a film degree, which is, it seems like they should show you this at film school now that I've seen it. But I admittedly have not seen this movie, even though I'd seen the name everywhere. I'd seen the title everywhere. I actually thought it was Teen Wolf, like the basketball movie.
Dude, I love that movie.
I was like, all right, sure. Yeah, and if we should have done that one, because then we could have talked about how there's an extra in the background of the basketball scene that flashes his penis, and they loved it in the film.
Right.
Yes, I remember that.
Nice.
I caught that. Yeah.
Well, there's still penis in this movie, so
there's still plenty of full frontal. So much so that he actually got fired from his Dr. Pepper commercials, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
For having a penis.
The best of us.
I actually thought that we were doing American Werewolf in Paris.
So
unfortunately, I need to leave this episode. I'm sorry, guys.
He is notorious for watching the sequel or the season 2 of something before even going to season 1.
And I will say that's Netflix's fault. They started me on season 2 of The Sinner one time, and Chris has not let me forget it since.
Yeah,
that's rough. That's real rough. Well, we appreciate you guys being here. It's good to get some comedy in the mix, because I think Dan and I take things a little too seriously sometimes.
We're very stuffy. We're very stuffy.
You guys are just so morose when it comes to film, guys. Like, why is everything so serious? No. You guys are great.
But yeah, so I mean, am I the only one then that's been with this movie for a while? I saw this back in maybe like 93, like definitely was too young. I was probably 11 or 12 when I got around to seeing this movie that I had seen in my older brother's tape collection. And I just like kept wanting to go to it. And then just like one day my mom's not in the house, and he's like, "It's time. We got to watch this." And it was, I mean, it hit me hard. Not just for the sheer fact of it being a horror movie that I'm seeing pretty young, but also the fact that there's just like this weird tone to it, which is kind of part of its legendary status, but also a part of why it really wasn't received great by critics at the time as well. So I wanted to kind of start off by asking people's thoughts about the horror comedy subgenre in particular. Like, do we see how this movie has influenced so many? Real quick, just the basics for people that might be listening and don't know the log line. First of all, listen to the log line, go watch it. It's streaming on Shudder as of this month, and then come back and listen to the rest of the episode. Basically, it's pretty simple. David and Jack, two American college students, are backpacking through Britain when a large wolf attacks them. David survives with a bite, but Jack is brutally killed. As David heals in the hospital, he's plagued by violent nightmares of his mutilated friend, who warns him that David is becoming a werewolf. When David discovers the horrible truth, he contemplates committing suicide before the next full moon causes him to transform from man to murderous beast once again. Is this something that has, do you think, influenced the world of horror comedies throughout the past 40 years?
I mean, was there horror comedy before this?
I don't know. I don't
Who's
think
got
so.
the film degree? Someone's got a film degree.
When did Evil Dead come out?
Like 89 or something?
Yeah, later.
It was later, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
wow.
Anything in the 70s? Something, there must have been horror comedy in the 70s.
The Blob or Invasion of the Body
Right.
Snatchers?
It was like B movies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Blob,
this
Sleepaway Camp.
Yeah.
I want to say was late 70s. Was it not?
I think
I think so.
if only we
Yeah,
had
maybe
Alexa.
79.
I thought it was 80s. Hold on. I
So
gotta look it up.
That movie's
88.
is pretty comedic, to
Oh,
be
yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
But I think this is the first to be directed by, a famous comedic director.
Yeah.
He did Animal House.
then Blues Brothers.
Kentucky Fried Movie, which is like one of the first sketch type movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's as I was watching it, I was thinking like, is this is a B movie before B movies were a thing? Is that what I'm seeing?
It's
Or
like
is it
exact halfway ground between B movie and cinematic experience.
right, like it was a seriously theatrical released movie
Right.
by Universal, but it had such over the top B movie vibes.
Yeah.
Albeit the execution of the practical and special effects were groundbreaking, but like it was I had B movie vibes the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting hybrid of a mood in this movie.
It's a real cosmic gumbo.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the thing that like sticks out to me is this fish out of water American abroad thing that they also throw in, which is sort of like, and then like I'm going through and I was like, okay, this adds a layer of like, I guess, comedy or irony to the situation that he's in. There's like a lot of miscommunication, all that kind of stuff.
The first 10 minutes of this movie are actually hilarious if you think about it.
Yeah.
If you think about how the people are acting in that bar
Mhm.
towards them, and like how obviously they're hiding all of this information from the guys about like, oh no, there's a werewolf outside. They're just like, let him go.
Yeah.
Well, they're immediately introduced as, I feel like, the sort of stereotypical American tourist.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, we're gonna check this place out and blah, not even respecting the culture, and then right off the bat talking about like, oh, I gotta sleep with that girl.
Yeah.
She's so hot. She doesn't have a choice. It's like,
Yikes.
hey, wait, what, dude?
Didn't even book a hotel room, just gonna shack up.
Yeah. And then they proceed to walk into that bar, which, like you said, it's just like, I so badly wanted them to just be like, you guys seem tense.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
How's it going, guys? No, it's like, what's on the wall? What's the star for?
You wouldn't happen to be withholding any information from me that would be detrimental to my health, would you?
Oh man.
And a large part of that, I think, is due to Griffin Dunne's performance, which is one of my favorite performances in 80s movies. And I feel like at least one of the reasons why he ended up getting the job for Scorsese's After Hours a few years later. And honestly, I've always kind of thought this since fall in love with this movie back in the day, where like, why didn't this guy get bigger? I think we can probably figure out why David Naughton did not really excel. other than the penis incident.
Well, I need some context to that.
Yeah,
I don't know anything. Someone tell the story. Like, what's his deal?
He has a penis.
Dr. Pepper didn't want him to.
Yeah, he had too much full frontal, and apparently a lot was edited out.
Right.
And he Landis actually said he regretted editing so much out, but he had to do it to get an R rating. He edited out a lot of sex scenes. He edited out some of the gore.
Like it would have been NC-17, you're saying?
Yes, yeah.
The hell?
Yeah.
And the resolution of the film.
Yeah, I mean, if you show penis, it's almost always NC-17. Like, it can't be. It has to be like, it's like a brief shot at most. But it's like murdering people left and right and like buckets of blood, and they're like, whatever.
Yeah. The guy you're referring
but
to.
no peepees.
Yeah, no
exactly.
peepees allowed. The guy you're referring to, what was it, Gavin or Garrett?
Griffin Dunne, who plays Jack, the friend.
Gunner.
It's double wrong.
One of those weird G names.
Jack. He is so. He did get more famous, but I feel like a supporting actor in this. And like even when they're like the whole scene when they go into the bar though can be summed up. Can I swear on this podcast?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
The whole scene in the bar can be summed up as "You fucking what, mate?"
Yeah.
That's the whole scene. Like them just like, so do you have some tea or some soup? And everyone's just like, "You fucking what?" Just unrelentless.
Do you guys have food? We don't got food.
Yeah.
Right.
What do we make of like Landis doing this now in his career? Because he's pretty like, I mean, Animal House was huge. Blues Brothers was huge. This wasn't like, what was the budget on this? I think it was like $6 million back in the day, which
right, a little under $6 million. It's pretty cheap.
Yeah. So, and like it's through Polygram Pictures, the production company, which was super new. That was the first year of their existence at the time. I mean, is this like a situation where like he had this cool idea and just wanted to run with it, and like Polygram's like, we're new, we have money, yeah, go for it? Or like, I wonder if this got like shopped around and rejected by like different companies.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say a movie that came out around the same exact time of this movie is called The Howling. Which features a lot of the same techniques used in this film. And whenever it was shopped around, it was pitched as a movie that would include a werewolf transformation in one shot. The the stunt coordinator, or like the special effects coordinator for The Howling was actually Rob Bottin, who eventually was pulled by John Landis to do this movie instead, because it's John Landis. He's a bigger name. He pulled him like essentially from a favor to be like, no, instead of doing that werewolf transformation, you're going to do this one. He's like, okay, well, you're offering more money, I'm going to do it. But this was like they're two very different films, but like that element of The Howling was sort of in a way like, I don't want to say stolen, but like American
sniped
Werewolf in
it.
London got to it first, I guess.
Well,
but that was the same concept.
Sort of. So Rick Baker was actually making The Howling.
Yes.
And they apparently, Landis and Baker had been talking about doing a werewolf movie for 8 years. And Landis finally said, "Hey, I've got the money, let's do it." And he's like, "Dude, I'm already doing a werewolf movie."
Right.
And he's like, "Well, now you're doing my werewolf movie," is basically what he said.
Yeah.
And so he handed off The Howling to his protege. Is
Rob
that
Bottin.
guy?
Yeah.
The Rob guy. And so you see like simultaneously in the same year, 2 werewolf movies came out with similar special effects that because it was like the same special effects team or protege and guy, but basically Landis just took Rick Baker over and was like,
and they have a very similar werewolf transformation scene, but because it's John Landis, it's a bigger name, and they had, arguably bigger actors in the movie. Like, this is the one that's remembered, as opposed to the scene in The Howling, which is very, very similar if you like kind of compare them side by side.
And adding even more drama to the behind the scenes stuff is that The Howling was directed by Joe Dante, who became friends with Landis during this and went on to direct Gremlins, another great horror comedy. And before The Howling, really the only big thing he had done was the schlock movie Piranha in 78, which got remade, back in the 2000s, I think.
Yes.
So there is like this, I mean, you're referencing, I think you should leave. But it is kind of like a cosmic gumbo of these guys all trying to do this huge, like, groundbreaking thing, but from the comedy angle instead of from the true horror angle.
Right.
And The Howling didn't have as much comedy as American Werewolf in London, or definitely not as much as Gremlins a few years later. But it makes you also think that, like, these guys, it's kind of cool that these guys connected, ended up being able to both find success through that angle, despite kind of what critics were saying at the time, which is that, you know, horror and comedy don't mix well. But, you know, history has proven otherwise.
I was looking up The Howling's budget, $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Nothing.
So that came out in March 81. So it actually came out before. So it came out March
Right.
81. This came out what, August 81?
August, yeah.
Yeah. So it beat it, but a much smaller film, like, 25% of this budget. Does it look, I mean, here's another question. Does it look like, we have different standards now, obviously, because, we have CGI and all this sort of stuff. Does it look like a bigger budget film, or does it look like an indie film when we're looking at it now? In the context of the 80s.
It just kind of looks like an 80s film to me. You know what I mean? Like, that, not indie, not big budget, just straight up.
I think everything aside from the werewolf transformation looks like a very standard, like, 80s film. But of course you can't watch this movie without that transformation, which is like, that's the price of admission right there, is that scene.
Yeah.
Right. I
That's
also
where the
think
money
that they're like, I totally agree that there's this kind of B moviness to it. This kind of low budgetness to it, aside from the transformation scene. But there's also like, and maybe this is something that I just caught on with rewatching over the years, but I feel like it's pretty artistically shot, especially in comparison to other Landis movies, and especially in comparison to other 80s horror movies. And I think one of the reasons for that is, for whatever reason, Landis hired Robert Painter to be his DP, who did Scorpio in 73 and did the remake of The Big Sleep in 78 and did Superman 2 the year prior.
Wow.
So like,
Oh, yeah.
it seems kind of strange that you would go for that kind of guy for this kind of movie. And yet once again, I think it's all the better for it. I mean, yes, the transformation scene is iconic, but I very much have stuck in my head of like the kind of overhead camera in the moors when they're first approaching the wolf.
Oh yeah.
And then the final shot, spoiler alert, but hopefully you're not listening to this if you don't know how the movie ends, of David's naked shot up body and then the hard cut to Blue Moon. I feel like there's those elements that make it that much more enjoyable, because it's not just, a schlocky, fun, bloody movie that happens to also have really good special effects. It also has really good framing, I think, too.
Well,
but
the dream
it's
sequences
clear.
are shot.
Yeah. Those are amazing. And then like the violence is pretty, I was surprised. Like there's a lot of gore here that is right in your face. I mean, obviously the makeup and effects are fantastic, but it's like pretty, what was this rated? It has to be rated R, but like,
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
I mean, darn, like that's like that's ridiculous. Like some of those shots, I was like, this is some pretty intense gore you're showing here with this comedic sort of tinge to it. What kind of comedy would you call this? Like what's the vibe of this comedy? It's not really postmodern Scream, right? I was looking at your top horror comedy list, Polly. It doesn't really fit with Scream. It doesn't really fit with What We Do in the Shadows or Shaun of the Dead. Those are more, I don't call it postmodern.
Those are like,
those
comedies.
those are like directly halfway comedy horror. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The birth of campy horror, like campy horror comedy. Like I think, Evil Dead was more serious, but Evil Dead 2 was like just
true.
Right.
Evil Dead 2.
over the top, insane fun. But like, I don't know. It's hard to. The mood of this is so confusing because, like we were just talking about, it's artistically shot. The gore and special effects are mind blowing, like with the cuts in the face,
Groundbreaking.
They're groundbreaking special effects. And then the dialogue is the most dumpster trash. Where it's like he wakes up from a nightmare and he just goes, well, holy shit. it's these cool sequences followed by these really silly, campy, over the top thing. Like when he starts his transformation into the wolf, the famous transformation, before going into one of the most groundbreaking special effects montages and shots of all time. He pulls out a book and starts reading it from the back, and then just goes, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" And then gets up and starts transforming. Oh, it burns! I'm so hot.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so silly. He's
Yeah.
immediately pouring sweat.
It's a little over the top.
And then it goes into one of the most like amazing practical effects sequences of all time. So you're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Because
the tone is kind of all over the place, and like you guys were saying, it's kind of like the first to really mix those, and it's a funny thing.
Yeah, I think it just lends itself well to having those, since John Landis isn't like an explicitly horror director, and he's, I guess, more used to doing strictly comedies, it sort of fills those peaks and valleys that would be filled with the typical horror things instead.
Yeah, like is it not boring to some parts of this movie, right? Some of it's just a little bit slow.
Well,
like, this love story.
Yeah,
The love story is what really kind of
a
like
little tacked on.
I've definitely needed more with the two best friend angle. Like after his friend is long dead, more of that, more of those conversations.
And the
Yeah.
progression of his decomposing corpse was the funniest thing to me. He would
It's
just
so
shows up, just like,
Yeah.
"Hey man, how's it going?"
Yeah,
And
his
just-
skin flapping around.
Oh, and they were so good too. And
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that pops out, like thinking about, the dialogue seems a little bit kind of sophomoric and not great, is that Landis wrote this when he was 20.
Yep.
Oh wow.
So he wrote it in 1970, essentially. And
color me surprised.
yeah, right. So you can see a lot of like how they talk about women, like this fantasy, this love affair, or whatever you want to call it, seems
With the
very
nurse.
20-year-oldish.
Yeah, the first fantasy anyone ever has is a nurse-based fantasy.
Yeah. Nursing you back to health, and then of course you shack up. But also that, like, and one thing that Rick Baker said too is that this is one of the only times he's made a movie where the movie was not changed from the script hardly at all. And so I kind of wonder, like, thinking back about John Landis and who he was in 20-year-old, certain parts of it feel like it's a 20-year-old's movie, but other parts, is that Rick Baker's influence here? Like, obviously all the effects and stuff like that. What's underneath all of that? Is there like a tight story here? Is there an interesting perspective about werewolves and what they like mean? Or is it just like kind of slapstick horror comedy? I don't know. I could see it both ways. I could see there's something going on and something not.
This seems like a student film with a huge budget.
Yeah.
Like that's where it was like, hey, make whatever movie you want. And it's like, it was ironically from a guy that has experience in movies, but it did feel like a bunch of kids making their first like horror movie in the neighborhood.
You can do a quick punch up, just anything at all to that script. No,
Don't alter your first draft, John. Just straight from 20-year-old straight to screen. But yeah, it's
I feel like the dialogue in the fake porno movies was probably better than
Well, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
ironically I read that the whole movie, unlike most movies, was shot in sequence, with the exception of the porn scene. The porn thing was the first thing they filmed.
Oh wow.
Really?
And then they shot the rest of the movie in sequence. And the
Interesting.
porn movie is another fun little weird quip. It's called See You Next Wednesday, which is something that is in every John Landis movie. It's a fake movie, or it's a billboard, or it's a line, or it's something where its origin is actually from 2001: A Space Odyssey, my favorite movie.
I love it.
I guess it's a shout out to that. So he just keeps putting like this homage in all his movies.
So Chris, don't you see the parallels of 2001: A Space Odyssey and an American
Absolutely.
Werewolf?
I mean, this movie came out 12 years or 13 years after 2001. And, it really doesn't show at all. It's 2001 and this movie in the same ballpark and category for me. But See You Next Wednesday was the line he says to one of the astronauts in a video call when they were wishing him happy birthday. He says, "All right, see you next Tuesday." Or next Wednesday. So that is now in all of John Landis's like movies and stuff. It's like a little Easter egg, but I don't know, what does it all mean?
Well, that's like, is there, I guess I wonder is like watching. Is there anything else going on here besides a 20-year-old making a movie with a lot of big budget? There's nothing else to hold on to in terms of like a story or like a metaphor. Is there anything?
It's really just a metaphor for the American influence of capitalism.
That's what I'm looking for.
Let me just film school this real quick.
It's about the space race.
I do have an honest question though.
That's
Do you think this film stands the test of time without the sequence that we're discussing?
I mean, I don't know if you want my opinion. I think you're going to want Paul's opinion on that.
You might have me go first.
What, I mean, this is your little baby.
Yeah,
here,
I'm totally been fanboying, obviously. No, but I feel like if I'm trying to be objective, yeah, this movie would be long forgotten. I probably would have never even seen it if it didn't have that that iconic transformation, right? It would have never won the Oscar. It would have never gone down in history. Maybe we'd be having this episode about The Howling if Rick Baker stayed on that movie instead. That said, I do think that there's a lot of other pieces of the movie that are interesting and do stand the test of time, even if it's unintentional, even if it's something that's like subconscious into the movie. From Landis as just like being that sophomore guy that, put Animal House together and Blues Brothers, and there's not really much to look past those other than getting really great performances out of some really legendary comedians. And he doesn't have Belushi here or Aykroyd or anybody, but he does have, I think, a really strong grasp on the idea of the connections between comedy and horror. And I think one of the best things about combining those two things is that no matter what, you're letting something out, whether you're laughing or you're screaming, you're jumping or you're giggling. Like it's that idea of like you want to do both of those things, and that's why people gravitate to both comedy and horror. And the fact that he was able to kind of find that thread, even if it is kind of basic, even if it is kind of first drafty, I think it's pretty spot on. I do want to answer your other question quick about allegory or meaning, and I once again don't think it's necessarily conscious or intentional, but there is a really cool essay if you do want to geek out film school style from Rolling Stone about there is some pretty oblique imagery of those nightmares where the monsters that are invading his house in his dream are all wearing Nazi uniforms. And there's also a kind of throwaway line from one of the doctors when he wakes up talking about like, who is this guy? We think he's an American. I think he's a Jew. And I don't think that's something you can really shrug off. And to not only talk about that, but also with there's almost like a Hamlet-esque scene that just happens to take place in a porno theater with his decomposing friend and his murder victims, where basically he's contemplating suicide. And like to have that in a movie that is otherwise so just like kind of adolescent in nature, I think really gets at a lot of the reasons why we watch horror movies and are constantly, thrilled by the concept of death, and whether it be a monster movie or a serial killer movie. Well, go ahead.
So you're saying this wasn't a prequel to Animorphs?
It could have been. It should have been.
So wait,
I think it's just about a werewolf.
Is the werewolf Reagan though, or is it Margaret Thatcher? It's got to be one of the two.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about 80s movies. There's always a subtext about Reaganism. Always.
Sure.
Like, whether you don't want to see it or not see it, it's all there, right? It's all like a production of that time. So
yeah, the Cold War like permeated everything at that time. So it was just a sort of reflection of cultural sensibilities for most movies.
What do we make of the Nazi demon sequence? Because I'm watching this last Saturday, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on, man? Like,
so
I think
it's bizarre.
John Landis just hates Nazis. It's probably the
anytime there's like zombies, it's now a cultural thing where it's like, you know what, Nazi zombie, you make them Nazis too. Throw that in so they're killable. Like, I don't know.
Call of Duty owes royalties to John Landis.
Yeah,
exactly.
But one thing you talked about was like there's like a throwaway line about him being Jewish, right? And ironically, and this is a real fact, believe it or not, they had to limit the amount of full frontal shots because he's not circumcised.
So it's not even like he's not Jewish.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's straight up not Jewish, which bummer for the audience, I guess. They had to limit all those full frontal shots. Shout out to Dr. Pepper. But that's a real thing. Like they were like, oh man, like your character's supposed to be Jewish and he's not a method actor.
Do you think you could circumcise yourself for this shot?
Let's go for it. Why not?
Daniel Day-Lewis is like,
Dan, it seemed like you didn't want to give your full analysis though. Like, what did you think? Please tear it apart, Dan. That's
I mean, here's the deal, guys. Like, and this is going to get into another part of Landis's career, right?
Yeah.
So I know Landis from the Twilight Zone,
of course,
incident, right? And that's sort of like for me, it's like I look at his career and I'm like, look, I love Animal House. It's great. It's a classic. Started a whole genre essentially. Blues Brothers is actually pretty good. As I get older, I love it even more and more. But like in Coming to America, of course, Three Amigos, these are great films. It's just this Twilight Zone situation. And the more you read about it, the more he comes across as kind of a complete asshole.
For those
and
that
like,
don't know,
somebody who
yes. Back up. Let's explain what happened on the set of the Twilight Zone movie.
So
3 years after American Werewolf in London.
He killed everyone.
Exactly. Yeah, he
Killed
everyone. Well, yeah, there's 2 kid actors that he hired illegally. Didn't actually hire them, paid them cash under the table.
the helicopter incident.
Yeah, and essentially there's a helicopter scene. It was a Vietnam sequence. Vic Morrow, who's the father of Jennifer Jason Leigh, he was acting with these 2 children actors. Pyrotechnic, like a thing goes off, an explosion hits the helicopter, it lands, decapitates Vic Morrow and one of the kids, and crushes the other kid to death. And there's a whole long history of this. You can go Wikipedia and read all about it.
There's
but the one
a
thing,
Shudder series as well.
Oh, is there?
Cursed Films. There's one entire episode dedicated to the incident.
Oh yeah, I did
is-
see that on there. That's awesome.
It is a tough watch, but a must watch if you're a film.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
must
check
watch.
that
It is
out.
tough.
They interview the art director, the set designer. It is tough, and they are struggling through that interview the entire time.
Yeah, they go through the trial and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you guys? I guess my interpretation of that whole thing is that, like, I don't know, man. It just doesn't seem good.
No,
There's
that's
nothing
on
good
John
coming out of
Landis.
that
Yeah,
situation.
he's
about
certainly
Landis.
culpable.
Yeah, blood
Yeah.
on his hands for sure.
Yeah,
And
I'm
his
surprised he did anything after that.
Yeah.
right, and his anti-union stance actually kind of started with American Werewolf in London, where
Yeah.
he was already trying to do sketchy stuff, arguably for a much better reason. He wanted a diverse cast of background actors, and especially because London was very diverse at the time, becoming more immigrant friendly, Brixton riots, etc. And he was getting a lot of pushback from the British Actors Union, which was vast majority white, very disproportionate to the actual population of London at the time. And he wanted to, kind of go against the book, and luckily for that movie, everything was good, and it was for a good reason. And you do see, at least for 1981, obviously no main or even supporting actors or people of color, except I think for one detective. But in 3 years later, he's probably thinking like, I'm gonna keep fighting the good fight against these damn unions and find my
regulations, the government.
yeah, and
Rebel.
and it probably fucks him up for life. I hope he's fucked up for life.
Well,
because of
but
that.
the thing about that, there's a weird correlator to that. You see this Rick Baker interview he did with Joe Rogan, right? And it's like, whatever, Joe Rogan. But it was a fascinating sort of thing where he talks about, like, this is, we talked about the script before. We didn't really change the script, we just went for it. He basically Landis gave Rick Baker total freedom. He basically said, here's kind of what I want, just go for it. And there wasn't a lot of back and forth. There wasn't a lot of sort of guardrails happening. So I think Landis was just used to, on some level, maybe a form of guerrilla filmmaking. And he's seen the results. And like Rick Baker even says, it's pure Rick Baker without interference. It's the best thing I've ever done. And so there's that weird juxtaposition of like having control and following the rules, and then sort of just being free and going for it. And I think obviously in the Twilight zone incident, it kind of went the wrong way. And I don't know if you ever, did he ever recover from that? I mean, he's done amazing movies since, but he's also kind of disappeared. Is that just me?
Yeah.
I'm making this up.
No,
No,
I
What
mean,
did he do
definitely.
in the 90s? Oscar,
Honestly-
Beverly Hills Cop 3? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
The
was
Stupid?
surprised to see he was still alive when I went to his IMDb, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
His son is no
supposed to-
better.
his son's kind of taken over, like Max Landis, right?
Yeah.
and he's also a horrible person.
And
That's
his
what
name
I've
is
heard,
Max.
Yeah, I've heard awful things about him.
Yeah. Very
It's
campy.
interesting. I mean, it's like I don't know. Is this we were probably like jumping to the release sort of legacy mode of this conversation, but this is probably outside of say Animal House. Is this and Blues Brothers probably top 3 films he's ever made?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was all downhill. If he hadn't literally killed 3 people, maybe we'd be saying something different. But like,
Whoops.
yeah,
Quite the fall from grace.
Yes.
yeah, it's rough. I mean, I think I should make clear that Trading Places also happened between Werewolf and Twilight, but and that's a stellar movie. But yeah, Coming to America, I don't know how he managed to keep that together, but I'm sure Eddie Murphy was mostly running the show.
Oh yeah.
So it's weird, but it also makes sense that it's such a terrible thing would derail somebody so completely. But I don't know if that's really I don't really think it's affected the legacy of Animal House or Blues Brothers
Not at all.
or
I
Trading
would say.
Places. Why would it
Definitely
affect
not
the legacy of
Coming
this
to
one?
No.
Yeah,
That's
think-
true. I mean, yeah, I'm just talking. I guess it's subjective, right? Like,
right.
I know Landis from the whole thing, and so like, and I see this, I'm like, I don't know. It's like I have a hard time.
Sure.
Do we cancel Landis? Like, why isn't Landis canceled for killing
In
people?
this year. Yeah.
I mean, there's, aside from this dialogue and a lot of full frontal with child actors in this movie, I might add as well.
Yeah.
He killed 3 people, and he's not necessarily canceled. I mean, what do you? Let's get a trending guy. Like, I don't know. I'm gonna start.
Let's
Let's
get the
start from the
hashtag
power of both of our podcasts.
Yeah.
Unlimited power.
our-
Cancel John
combined.
Landis.
We're gonna Captain Planet this.
The 2 podcasts that took down John Landis. Thanks, CNN.
BuzzFeed.
Yes, no, yeah, exactly.
I mean, but okay, what did critics think when this thing came out? That's what I can't figure out because I'm looking at the Metacritic thing, and I read
it's all
a
a
lot of
mess.
these. It's all over the place.
Right. And I mean, we talked about this when we were doing that Michael Cimino movie, Desperate Hours,
Oh,
from the
yeah.
80s, where it's like, you really can't trust anything on, I think, Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic pre-1990-ish. And ultimately, the limited reviews that are still available, if you do your own kind of read of the big... the big 3, Variety, New York Times, and Ebert, it was very much a spectrum. Variety gave it a glowing review. Maslin from New York Times said Landis's comic detachment, which has been fascinating throughout the movie, is something he holds on to even when a deeper response is needed. So she's kind of 50-50 on it. Whereas Ebert really, he was also kind of in a grumpy mood, I think, in the early 80s after his failed attempt to transition to screenwriting. He says,
movie is hilarious, by the way.
Which movie?
Roger Ebert's movie.
yeah, Beyond the
Oh,
Valley
yeah.
Dolls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real
But he said that Werewolf in London seems curiously unfinished, as if director Landis spent all his energy on spectacular set pieces and then didn't want to bother with things like transitions, character development, or an ending. Which,
Well, I
harsh
would
but
agree
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would actually agree with
Pretty
the
right on the money.
transitions and the ending for sure. There was a lot of abrupt, like, well, next scene now, and it just would hard cut to from nightmare to nightmare or from scene to
Mhm.
scene, and then the ending was just like shot, bang, credits. It was just like, oh, okay, that is all it is.
Yeah.
But I wasn't mad about the ending, where it was just like I did feel like, yeah, that's about it.
You're right.
Yeah, but like I guess now we expect a full resolution to that, and like her story after that, and like going to a gravesite or something, and then something else happening.
Yeah.
Like we're so conditioned for a resolution that
right.
the fact that it ends the way it does is like kind of alarming. But then it's like, okay,
Yeah.
like yeah, you're right. It's like, oh, okay, that was it.
I've never seen a movie try and tell a character to kill themselves more. I thought that was so wild, about? Where it was like, dude, you just kill yourself.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You're gonna. He's like, I can't.
Yeah.
And then just keeps killing people. And it's like, maybe it's the virtue of man and ego. Or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not trying to film school this, but it's like they really like the undead is telling him like, hey, if you don't kill yourself, many people will die, and he arguably knows this and refuses to kill himself.
Yeah, and because the dialogue, he's just like, "Come on."
Yeah. Essentially, that's the.
It does make one wonder, in retrospect, is this kind of Landis trying to tell himself to kill himself before he kills the people in the Twilight Zone set?
The big brain take.
I love that though. I mean, that's good. I mean, critics are all over the place.
Right.
Some of the major ones didn't like it, but this is not a cult film, is it? Would you call it a cult film?
I would say so.
I think so.
You think
yeah.
so? Okay,
I
that's
would
a cult
say for
film.
sure,
Okay.
and that's a problem with going back and looking at reviews or whatever, because a lot of cult movies they bomb on release, they're trashed, and then 10, 20, 30 years later, people are like, oh, this is like so bad it's good, or the genius wasn't appreciated at the time.
Yeah.
And so now it's revered. But it's tough to know exactly like what was the cultural
footprint
at the time. It's tough to like.
Well, I can answer that very simply. If you think if this isn't a cult movie, just imagine the reaction to it being announced in 2021 that An American Werewolf in London is being completely remade.
People get pissed. They're going to lose it.
Yes.
That's real, right?
That's a cult film.
And that's happening, right?
Yeah,
Is
that's
it?
real. That's an
Max Landis is has been trying to do it for a couple of years now.
That's so lame. That's so
Hack.
lame.
Well, what I was thinking was, I wrote as I was watching this, I wrote down I would kill for a remake of this movie. And then when I looked at John Landis's IMDb, I saw it was announced and he's producing it.
2 wishes left.
What?
2 wishes left.
Yeah. So basically, but then I really started to think about how would they remake this movie, because what it's known for is practical special effects.
Yeah, carried the movie.
You're gonna try and one up Rick Baker. Like, first of all, Rick Baker's got to be involved. Period. If you don't do it, if he doesn't try and like best himself, just fuck the movie. If you try and do it with computers, fuck you.
Nope.
And fuck your movie. Yeah. It must be done. It must take the comedy and ramp it up. It must take the blood and ramp it up. It must take the special effects and ramp it up. It must do a almost shot for shot, but trumping itself remake.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that it would just be the Thing remake from the early 2000s. It would just be it would try really hard, but ultimately it would just be a CGI, extravaganza.
It's one of those things where you see it and you go, don't fuck this up, and you're gonna watch it. You're gonna, from frame one, if you watch the remake of An American Werewolf in London, from frame one, you're gonna be like, prove me wrong.
Yep.
You don't need to do this. So you're starting from behind the starting line. Yeah, when it comes to when you do a remake,
it's as soon as it starts, you're just tapping your temple with your next finger.
Let's see you justify this.
Yeah.
And you would have to get like this weird assemblage of people. Like you're gonna get like an artistic big budget cinematographer. Are you gonna get like the musician Elmer Bernstein type of score for that kind of thing? I don't know. It's like, I mean, Edgar Wright
just wants to give it to Denny V.
Yeah,
there you go.
American
Werewolf.
Oh my
gosh!
And Roger Deakins cinematography and score by Hans Zimmer. Just fucking put a ball on it.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things about this movie that I noticed is it's, I guess, before like the major advent of a sound designer incorporating constant ambient tones or music throughout the movie. So there are definite lulls where there's absolutely silence.
Yeah, well, it's funny. There's a lot of people they're like begging for the soundtrack to be released, and when it finally was, it was 7 minutes long.
There you go.
The rest of it was ambience.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just keyboards and stuff. So like all these audio files and like music people were like, release the soundtrack, and they're like, all right,
there you go.
It's like 2 tracks.
Well, and Bernstein actually has a really interesting anecdote about composing and recording tons of music for this movie, but Landis just kept saying like, you don't have to do this, Elmer. We're gonna get Blue Moon.
Elmer.
And Bernstein was just like, fuck you, I want to score this transformation sequence. And he ended up releasing it on his own years later under the name Metamorphosis. But it's just, it's pretty weird that like it's once again one of those kooks of Landis where it's like, why are you asking these people if you're not going to actually let them do their thing, except for Rick Baker? And once again, like going back to the idea of a remake, like who would try to do this with practical effects? Because Baker's retired. It's not like they're going to bring him out of it.
Guy from Greg, whatever his name is, from The Walking Dead, dude. He episodes. He's like the lead effects guy. So what about Tom Savini? He's not doing anything. He's like 75 and like bored, probably
retired as fuck.
Yeah, he'd be really great for this. I mean, that is like, it begs the question. So like, that's a really good point. If someone said they're going to remake this, people would like sort of be like, "Oh, this is bullshit." But why is that? What is it specifically about this film that resonates still? Like, what is it? Is this something where, hey, it was a kind of a cult film back in the 80s, built this reputation, and now just has this like prestige attached to it? Or is this something that like, younger people are visiting and be like, "Oh, this is amazing. This is great." Like, who is the person that like canonized this film? Like, what group of people did that?
Rick Baker.
Yeah.
Rick Baker on like the comic convention circuit.
This movie is the reason that Rick Baker got hired to do Thriller, and that cemented his status as the best in the business.
Yeah, and John Landis directed that too.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Michael Jackson approached them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So he saw this movie and was like, "I need everyone involved."
Yeah.
To do my video.
Yeah.
By the way, it's a 20-minute short film or whatever. But yeah, it's wild. I think to answer your question though, it's sort of a side note, but the note of this movie is so confusing. So let's say I went in pretty blind, but not blind enough, because if I had gone into this movie not knowing it was a horror comedy, not knowing it was John Landis, anything like that, if you had said watch this movie, I would have thought this was a movie trying to be serious and just coming across funny.
Right.
Because that's
because of the script.
Yeah, because of the script. But then I would see the practical effects and be like, this is so fucking good.
Yeah.
and then be like, but it can't be serious. But it's so good, but it can't be serious.
Yeah.
Like there was too many laughable dialogue moments for me to yeah, so it's the confusing tone is it's lightning in a bottle that can't be recaptured. Right. I just don't. Yeah. It's a genre bending thing that arguably was one of the most, if not the first, definitely the most successful to do it. And I'm glad you guys recommended it because I had no idea about it was this much of a. Like I said, I thought it was the fucking basketball movie. So I was like, when I kept waiting, I was like, when is he gonna get to the basketball? The whole movie, I was like, okay, so we killed a few people. He's in London. Do they play basketball?
You're right.
They don't play basketball.
No, he's gonna end up throwing discus or I don't know.
Whatever they do in the UK.
He's like just end up on a
cricket.
Cricket.
I don't know. It's fascinating to me, like how a movie like this it's a super important movie. One, for the practical effects, without a doubt. Two, for what you talked about in terms of walking this tightrope of genre and this odd mixture of people involved. It's also a product of like basically a tiny upstart studio that was an offshoot of a record company. Yeah. Right? Like there's a lot of weird stuff going on here. And somehow it mixes together and it works. And I wonder, but like I always wonder, like, who is this? Like film nerds who are like propping this up? I just can't imagine an average person asking somebody to be like, oh, it's like they're like 40 years old. You're like, what do you think about American Werewolf in London? Like, is there going to be a reaction, or is this going to be like, oh, it's just like people who are super into film talk about this movie a lot, and that's why it has a status?
I think it's probably specifically horror nerds.
Yeah, horror buffs are definitely. Right? Yeah,
like Gloria, whatever the hell that magazine's called.
Totally,
right. Exactly.
Anybody that has a Shudder subscription loves
it. Exactly.
I love it. Okay, any closing thoughts? Let's close this out. What do you think about this overall?
Guests go first.
Yeah, I guess go first. What's your final take on American Werewolf in London?
I thought it was a happy-go-lucky, fun time, and I had a fun time. By the way, can we talk about the car wreck stunts?
Please, that's
what
what I
the
was
fuck?
gonna-
Did people
They're
not
amazing.
get sandwiched between cars? What the
No.
fuck was that?
That was amazing.
John Landis.
He's a psycho.
He's like, you know what? We don't need the stunt coordinator.
Just crash the fucking car.
Yeah. Listen,
Do whatever you want.
I told
They got
the safety
national
guy
healthcare
9 p.m.
in
and it's 7
England,
p.m. We're rolling. Go.
We still got film.
Yeah,
Fuck 'em up.
I was taken aback by that whole thing. It was just like absurd and super
Yeah.
violent.
Yeah, people literally being ejected through the windshields. I was like,
Head first.
yeah, and then immediately crushed by another car.
Yeah.
It was like I was.
It was so
It
cruel.
turned into a Michael Bay film very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just but there was a scene where, like you were saying, it looked like the car went a little too far and literally sandwiched a human being, and it cuts away a little too quick. So I was like, wait,
You're
a
like,
second.
wait, yeah.
I was like,
That guy's now paralyzed, probably.
yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't walk no mo. I think that this movie, I feel so kind of like detached. Like I understand what you guys are saying. I respect that you guys feel a certain way about it, especially you, Chris. But for me, I guess very much like not like a giant horror aficionado or anything like that. I kind of look at it as like, yeah, I get why it stands the test of time, and it's Rick Baker, and that's why you watch this movie. You watch it for the special effects and probably nothing else, at least for me and my tastes. But it's definitely worth that watch because of that. It's worth the price of admission for that scene alone.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to echo that. I want to thank you guys for recommending this movie because before, if you hadn't, I wouldn't have seen obviously one of the a cult classic, and I enjoyed it. I had a blast. Just a few fun facts I want to get out there so they're said. There was 1 second, let me find it in my notes here. So Rick Baker plays one of the Nazi werewolves in the nightmare sequence.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
So-
yeah.
And he was specifically the one who slashes David's throat. And he was very nervous during that scene because Rick Baker couldn't see out of the mask he was in.
John Landis at it again.
Yeah. It's Landisian is going to be like a term.
Like when an actor gets murdered on set.
when
Brandon Lee and the Crow. Yeah, that's like
Oh.
when things are just a little too unsafe.
Yeah, I would say Kafka-esque if I knew what that meant.
Also, at the close of the credits, did you guys know there's a congratulatory message for the wedding of Prince Charles? Because,
Who the fuck?
he called him a slur in the middle of the movie.
Oh,
So
yeah.
at the end, they basically go, well, also congratulations on marriage. Like, they tried to, like...
Please don't kill us.
Yeah, be nice about it at the end of the movie or whatever. But just those little fun facts. I had a blast with this movie, and the price of admission, again, was the Rick Baker.
Totally.
It's just the Rick Baker show. And
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just let him shine.
Totally. Thank you guys so much for coming on. And I mean, it co-signed on everything, even though, I'm definitely more biased in terms of hoping this movie's legacy lives on. And I mean, I guess my next recommendation would be to watch Teen Wolf because
Teen Wolf was so good. It's like a classic film from the 80s.
you can skip Teen Wolf 2 with Justin Bateman probably, but
Yeah.
the first one with Michael J. Fox, absolutely.
this
What do
is
we got?
currently streaming on Prime too, just FYI.
Oh, yeah.
It's more of
Nice.
a comedy horror, right? Teen
Right.
Wolf? Comedy first
Well,
for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's barely any horror. Like it's
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
It's
slightly
much more
scary.
campy than this. Yeah.
yes.
What are you guys doing for your next episode, by the way?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, we haven't planned that.
That's a really good question. Well, we do have a Patreon where we do bonus episodes
Nice.
that are not exclusive, or that are exclusive to like our Patreon listeners. And the next one is There Will Be Blood.
Oh,
Ooh,
nice.
Right?
The next Patreon episode?
Sure.
I think we agreed on
Yeah,
that.
we talked about it.
It has been
Right
decided.
now.
It's not going out.
It has been decided
over the
ultimately.
waves.
When is this coming out, guys?
Coming out tomorrow. No.
Okay.
And where can people find your podcast?
On the internet. It's on
You guys,
Spotify,
too many
on YouTube.
movies.com, right?
TooManyMovies.com. Yeah, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok. Famously, is our that's our biggest platform. Ironically,
Yeah.
Wait,
Our
TikTok
podcast.
is?
Yep.
Is it because of the Mayor of Easttown editor thing that I heard in the Conjuring episode?
that was part of it.
Trigger warning: editors for Mayor of Easttown.
Yeah. No, we've just had a few clips from our show just take off on there. So
Really?
if
we have about
you're not on there, man.
We have like 33,000 followers on our TikTok.
Yep.
For whatever reason, and we don't twork either.
We have 33,000 followers on a children's dancing app, and then it has directed a lot to our actual podcast. So,
that's awesome, man. Yeah, that's really cool.
But if you search the phrase "there are too many movies anywhere," you will definitely find us.
Yeah,
nice.
Awesome,
fantastic.
Great stuff. Dan, what do we got coming up next week on Film Trace?
This is going to be a special episode because we're going to do 3 movies in one. We're going to do the horror trilogy Fear Street, which is sort of premiered the last few weeks on Netflix. It's a lot of fun. It'll be a good episode. We'll try and cram it all into about an hour if we can do it. But thank you for listening. This has been Film Tricks.